Here's a riddle for you. What do you get when one monopoly teams up with another monopoly to control the information you have access to online? You get a big brother you never asked for
and one you never wanted.
Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and it's been a while since I've done one of these videos breaking down a deposition testimony. This time it's going to be Mark Zuckerberg's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, for those of you who may not know, last week at the time of shooting this vlog, the Senate Judiciary Committee questioned Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey on their respective platforms, misinformation online, and how Facebook and Twitter might have had an influence on the 2020 US elections. There were hours of testimony, literally. Some good, some bad, some grandstanding. There were some moments that were shocking, some moments that were scary, and while there's too much to cover, I just want to deal with one line of questioning from Representative Josh Hawley of Mark Zuckerberg. Hawley asked some great questions, and Zuckerberg's answers were so revealing in what he said and what he did not say, his demeanor, that I said we need to break this down. First things first, before we even get started, a brief bio on Hawley for those of you who don't know who he is, because I didn't know who he was before this. Joshua David Hawley, born December 31, 1979, is an American lawyer and politician serving as junior U.S. Senator from Missouri. And just to put Hawley's youth in perspective, I am actually over 6 months older than Mr. Hawley. A member of the Republican Party, Hawley served as the 42nd Missouri Attorney General from 2017 to 2019 before defeating two-term Democratic incumbent Senator Claire McCaskill in the 2018 election. At age 40, he is the youngest current U.S. Senator. Hawley holds degrees in history and law from Stanford University and Yale Law School, respectively. Before becoming Attorney General of Missouri, he was an associate professor at the University of Missouri Law School and worked as an appellate litigator. Now, Senator Hawley had some great questions from Mark Zuckerberg, and the information that was revealed really should be terrifying to anybody, but one thing that I could not get over was the fact that Zuckerberg answered every question by starting off with the word senator, and I mean every question.
Now, Mr. Zuckerberg, you're familiar with the task platform, aren't you?
Senator,
does Facebook coordinate its content moderation policies or efforts in any way with Google or Twitter?
Senator, let me be clear about this. Senator again. Senator, I do not know. Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that? Senator, I believe so. Senator, I do not know the exact number. Senator, we can follow up. Senator, we should follow up on what would be useful here.
Okay, if you don't find that irritating, we have different standards of irritation, and I'm not pointing this out just to make fun of the fact that he's starting every answer with the word senator. In court, when a judge asks a witness a question, typically the witness will start the answer with "Your Honor" or something to that effect. They use the title to show respect for the judge and not necessarily because they're misleading the judge. But in my very humble opinion, that is not at all the dynamic of what is going on here. Zuckerberg is not starting every answer with the word senator to show respect or deference to the senator. He is doing it to buy himself some time to frame the answer in his own mind before he spouts it out. Zuckerberg's incessant, repeated, almost reflexive use of the term senator is not intended to show respect. It is intended to buy time. It is intended to buy time for the purposes of deceit or misdirection, as I think I see in each and every one of his answers. And now that I have tainted your perspective of what you are about to see, let's get into the actual questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the late 19th century, the heads of the biggest corporations in America, the robber barons, got together and they set rates, they set prices, they determined how they would control information flow, they determined how they get rid of competition. And I'll be darned if we aren't right back there again. Except for this time, you're the robber barons. Your companies are the most powerful companies in the world. And I want to talk about how you're coordinating together to control information. In recent days, my office was contacted by a Facebook whistleblower, a former employee of the company with direct knowledge of the company's content moderation practices. And I want to start by talking about an internal platform called Tasks that Facebook uses to coordinate projects, including censorship. The Tasks platform allows Facebook employees to communicate about projects they're working on together. That includes Facebook's censorship teams, including the so-called community well-being team, the integrity team, and the hate speech engineering team, who all use the Task platform to discuss which individuals or hashtags or websites to ban. Now, Mr. Zuckerberg, you're familiar with the Task platform, aren't you?
Senator, we use the task system for...
Notice the senator, the delay, and then Zuckerberg actually just doesn't answer the question. Hawley asked him if he is familiar with the task platform, and Zuckerberg says, what? He doesn't answer the question and then gets into, we use the task platform for a totally convoluted hemming and hawing of an answer.
Senator, we use the task system for, I think it's, as you say, for people coordinating all kinds of work across the company, although I'm not sure if I'd agree with the characterization specifically around content moderation that you gave.
Well, let's get into that, and let me see if we can refresh your memory and provide folks at home watching with an example. Here over my shoulder is an example. It's a screenshot of the task platform in use. You'll notice if the camera zoom in, several references to election integrity throughout on these lists of tasks. Again, this is shared across Facebook's sites, company locations, by working groups. What particularly intrigued me is that the platform reflects censorship input from Google and Twitter as well. So Facebook, as I understand it, Facebook censorship teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter and Google and then enter those companies' suggestions for censorship onto the task platform so that Facebook can then follow up with them and effectively coordinate their censorship efforts. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, let me just ask you directly, under oath now, does Facebook coordinate its content moderation policies or efforts in any way with Google or Twitter?
Appreciate how serious an accusation this is, that Facebook would coordinate with Google and Twitter as relates to censorship on its platform. That is one monopoly teaming up with another monopoly to decide what information gets censored on which platform.
And how does Zuckerberg answer the question?
Senator, let me be clear about this.
Before we get into the rest of the answer, I actually have to stop it here and go back to one of the undumb things I said on Twitter, that when anybody prefaces an answer with "let me be clear," more often than not, what is going to come in the following part of that answer is going to be misleading nonsense.
Senator, let me be clear about this.
Hawley asks Zuckerberg a very clear question here. Does Facebook coordinate with Twitter or Google as relates to content moderation or censorship? Zuckerberg starts off with Senator, a delay so that he can get his misleading answer clear in his head. Let me be clear. In other words, what is about to come out of my mouth is going to be misleading, and listen to this answer.
Let me be clear about this. We do coordinate on and share signals on security-related topics. So, for example, if there is signal around a terrorist attack or around child exploitation imagery or around a foreign government creating an influence operation, that is an area where the companies do share signals about what they see. But I think it's important to be very clear that that is distinct from the content moderation policies that we or the other companies have, where once we share intelligence or signals between the companies, each company makes its own assessment of the right way to address and deal with that information.
It is a very subtle intellectual sleight of hand what Zuckerberg is doing right here. He is confirming that they do in fact coordinate as relates to one issue without admitting or denying that they do coordinate as relates to the other issue. So they coordinate with respect to security, but he does not confirm whether or not they coordinate for other reasons. What does that mean to me? They do in fact coordinate specifically as relates to Hawley's question, but Zuckerberg doesn't want to admit that, so instead he admits something else as relates to another question that Hawley didn't ask.
Well, I'm talking about content moderation. I'm talking about individuals, websites, hashtags, phrases to ban. Is it your testimony that you do not communicate with Twitter or Google about content moderation, about individuals, websites, phrases, hashtags to ban? Just yes or no. Do you communicate with Twitter or Google about coordinating your policies in this way?
All right, just a little critique of the way Hawley asked this question here. He asked the question actually 3 times if you count it. It's kind of a wordy way, the way he formulated it the first time, but then he goes on to repeat it a second and a third time, which allows for a witness to weasel out of the answer, but wait until you see Zuckerberg's weasel out of an answer.
Senator, we do not coordinate our policies.
Hawley asked Zuckerberg if Facebook communicates with Google or Twitter to coordinate their policies. He did not ask whether or not they in fact coordinate their policies. And what does Zuckerberg answer? We do not coordinate our policies. That was not the question. The question was whether or not you communicate with Twitter or Google to coordinate your policies.
Do you communicate with Twitter or Google about coordinating your policies in this way?
Senator, we do not coordinate our policies.
A very subtle but absolutely essential distinction, because Zuckerberg is not answering the question that was asked to him. Does Facebook communicate with Twitter or Google to coordinate their policies? Senator, delay, let me get my misleading answer clear in my head. We do not coordinate our policies. Well, thank you for answering a question that no one asked.
Do your Facebook content moderation teams communicate with their counterparts at Twitter or Google?
Senator, I'm not aware of anything specific, but I think it would be probably pretty normal for people to talk to their peers and colleagues in the industry.
It would be normal, but you don't do it?
No, I'm saying that I'm not aware of any particular conversation, but...
Senator, delay, let me get my misleading answer clear in my head. I'm not aware of any particular conversation. Well, no one was asking you, Zuckerberg, whether or not you were aware of a particular conversation. Hawley was asking you at large, is there correspondence? And you basically answer but refuse to answer and focus on a specific that no one asked you. That is deceptive answering 101.
I would expect that some level of communication probably happens, but that is different from coordinating what our policies are or our responses in specific instances.
Well, fortunately, I understand that the task platform is searchable. So will you provide a list of every mention of Google or Twitter from the tasks platform to this committee?
Senator, that's something that I can follow up with you and your team after on.
A clear question from Hawley. Will you provide us with a list? Zuckerberg, Senator, let me get my misleading answer clear in my head before I say it. We can coordinate that afterwards. No, you don't need to coordinate afterwards in order to answer that question right now. Furthermore, when you coordinate afterwards, you're not going to be under oath anymore. The follow-up coordination is in carrying out the undertaking, not undertaking to do it, and you don't need to wait in order to confirm that you will do it.
Well, yes or no, I'm sure you can follow up with the list, but why don't you commit while I've got you here under oath? It's so much better to do this under oath. Will you commit now to providing a list from the tasks platform of every mention of Google or Twitter?
Senator, respectfully, I'm without having looked into this, I'm not aware of any sensitivity that might exist around that, so I don't think it would be wise for me to commit to that right now, but I would be happy to follow.
There is a term in the English language for excessive verbiage that actually says nothing at all. I believe it is verbal diarrhea. Zuckerberg, you have a bad case of verbal diarrhea right now. You can't even answer the most basic questions that are yes or no answers. Senator Hawley, Zuckerberg, yes or no? Zuckerberg, Senator, I don't really know. I have to look into. We can coordinate afterwards.
Oh my goodness.
Mr. Zuckerberg, tell me about Centra. What is the Facebook internal tool called Centra?
Senator, I'm not aware of any tool with that name.
Well, Matt, let me see if this refreshes your memory. There's a demonstrative now over my shoulder. Centra is a tool that Facebook uses to track its users, not just on Facebook, but across the entire internet. Centra tracks different profiles that a user visits, their message recipients, their linked accounts, the pages they visit around the web that have Facebook buttons. Centra also uses behavioral data to monitor users' accounts, even if those accounts are registered under a different name. And you can see a shot here, a screenshot provided to us of the Centra platform. We blocked out the user's name in the interest of privacy, although you can see this individual's birth date and age, when they first started using Facebook, their last login, as well as all manner of trackings. How many different devices have they used to access Facebook? How many different accounts are associated with their name? What accounts have they visited? What photos have they tagged? And on and on and on. Mr. Zuckerberg, how many accounts in the United States have been subject to review and shut down through Centra?
Senator, I do not know because I'm not actually familiar with the name of that tool.
Senator, delay. Let me get my deceitful answer ready in my own head, and look at the way he weasels out of answering that question. He can't answer the question not because the tool doesn't exist, but because he's not familiar with the name of the tool that Senator Hawley gave it.
Senator, I do not know because I'm not actually familiar with the name of that tool.
Zuckerberg does not know because he's not familiar with the name of that tool, but he sure as heck knows that that tool or something like it exists. This is terrifying, and this is mind-blowing, and my goodness, the way he does not answer these questions is ultimately irritating.
I'm sure that we have tools that help us with our platform and community integrity work. But I am not familiar with that name.
Do you have a tool that does exactly what I've described and that you can see here over my shoulder? Or are you saying that that doesn't exist?
Senator, I'm saying that I'm not familiar with it.
Senator, hemming and hawing, I am saying that I'm not familiar with it, and we don't know what the it is to which he's referring, but I guarantee you, in his own mind, to justify his own misleading answer, he is not familiar with Sentra, but he is darn well familiar with that very tool. But he will be happy to follow up with Senator Hawley after the fact when he is no longer under oath, susceptible of penalty of perjury, I imagine. He'll be happy to follow up then when he can mislead and lie with impunity.
Senator, I'm saying that I'm not familiar with it, and that I'd be happy to follow up and get you and your team the information that you would like on this. But I'm limited in what I can, what I'm familiar with and can share today.
Pay close attention to that subtle yet insidiously deceitful conjunction. Zuckerberg is limited in what he's familiar with and what he can share today. Those are two very different things. And by lumping them together subtly as he does, he's basically saying, I'm not going to answer any of your questions today.
But I'm limited in what I can, what I'm familiar with and can share today.
It's always amazing to me, Mr. Chairman, how many people before this committee suddenly develop amnesia. Maybe it is something about the air in the room. Let me ask you this. When a Facebook employee accesses a user's private information, like their private messages or their personally identifiable data, is a record made of that, Mr. Zuckerberg?
Sorry, Senator, could you repeat that?
Is a record made of any time a Facebook employee accesses a user's private information, personally identifiable information, for example, messages? Is a record made any time a Facebook employee does that?
Senator, I believe so.
Does it trigger an audit?
Senator, I think sometimes it may.
How many audits have been conducted?
Senator, I do not know the exact number of audits.
Can you give me a list?
Senator, we can follow up on that to see what would be useful here.
Again, Hawley, can you make me a list? Zuckerberg, we can follow up. We don't need to follow up on the content of the list. The question is whether or not you are going to undertake today, under oath, to make that list, and Zuckerberg does not answer that question. Following up on satisfying the undertaking is different than following up on making the undertaking.
Will you, I'm almost finished, Mr. Chairman. Will you commit to giving us a list of the number of times Facebook employees have accessed users' personal account information without their knowledge? Yes or no?
Senator, we should follow up on what would be useful here. It is, of course, in the operations of the company, if someone reports something, sometimes necessary for people at the company to go review and understand the context around what is happening when someone reports something. So this is fairly frequent and is a matter of course. We do have security systems that can detect anomalous patterns to flag, but we should follow up in more detail on what you're interested in.
The translation on that convoluted verbal diarrhea of a non-answer is yes, Senator Hawley, everything you just said is true. Yes, we have the list. Yes, we can do all of that, but I'm not going to do it now. Let's talk a little later. As though Zuckerberg is just gracing the Senate Judiciary Committee with his presence, they'll talk a little later. I know they called him to a Senate Judiciary Committee to testify under oath, but we'll talk about it later. I really don't need to answer any of your questions right now. You are just an elected official.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say in closing that what we have here is clear evidence of coordination between Twitter, Google, and Facebook. Mr. Zuckerberg knows he has the tools to track this, but he either doesn't remember or won't commit to letting us see it. We have evidence of Facebook tracking its own users all across the web. Mr. Zuckerberg won't answer questions about it, can't remember the name, isn't sure if the tool is deployed in this way, and won't commit to giving us basic information. I submit to you that this is both totally unacceptable and totally predictable, because it is exactly what these tech companies have done to the American people and to Congress for years now, which is why it is time we took action against these modern-day robber barons. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was a very nice, impassioned speech, Hawley, and while I think you did a very good job with Zuckerberg, you know what the only problem with that entire thing was? You should have done it the week before the election.
Not the week after the election.
There are a lot of people out there who are understandably going to think that, you know what else is predictable in all of this theater? That all of this theater occurs the week after the election and not the week before, once the damage is already done. Anybody who has been paying the slightest bit of attention has known that this has been going on for years, so doing all of this the week after its impacts have been felt by an entire nation, it's a little, too late. Or to look at it from the optimistic perspective of the glass half full, better late than never, I guess. And with that said and done, if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
The algorithm that Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are surveilling for the purposes of collecting data.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube membership. Robert Barnes and I have a locals page, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone in America, and now you know your vlog. Peace out.